everybody, and welcome back. It is my absolute pleasure to be sitting down with Nate Jones, who's running for SGA Executive President. How's it going?
It's dandy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on. So, quick question. What is your history with SGA? Do you have any experience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm old. My sophomore year, I was appointed to the position of developmental senator.
Okay.
So what that job entails is basically for organizations that are not necessarily considered legitimate and have not been here for a long time. I would be able to talk with those organizations and figure out how they could get funding and all of that. But when I was first getting on SGA, the position really hadn't been in place for a while. So I've had a little bit of a different SGA experience because I actually didn't really know what my job was. So for much of that year, actually for the majority of that year, I just kind of spent time observing SGA, working on the different committees, the One Phoenix Committee, a little bit with SIC, which is the Student Inclusive Campus Committee. But my job itself, it was kind of interesting because I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, I would love some info, right? And so in that way, I've just had like a little bit of a different journey on SGA. Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you learned from that role, and how do you plan to use those as executive president?
Yeah. So I think the main thing, like I said, was sort of just like observing the different it's politics, right? So figuring out the different dynamics, the way that people speak to one another within SGA, I think is really important, especially if you are trying to enact positive change on a campus. It's good to know how to talk with people who come from different spaces, different perspectives. And so I think a large majority of what I did was really just like figure out and like kind of watch the way people speak to one another. So what I would want to implement is just kind of that skill of like, okay, I've observed for a long time, like now I'm ready and here we go.
That's awesome, thank you. Is there anything specific that made you want to run for this position? And if so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I just love Elon, and I love SGA too, which is like, I know, a very cliche answer. But my love for Elon really has grown since I became a student here. In my journey to Elon, we don't have time, but it was very nuanced and complicated, like everyone's journey is. But ever since I got here, my love for it just has grown. And so I just wanted a way to give back to the institution and to all of my friends and fellow students that have just made my time here all the more worth it. You know?
That's great. That's great. So what are some of your plans for your first 100 days in office? Some of the changes you want to make or some things you want to implement?
Big question.
Yeah, big question.
Hit me with it. Yeah.
Loaded.
So one of the things that I think we should do is collectively like come together as SGA and as a student body and really figure out like what are we talking about, right? Like what are we talking about, right? So we say words like inclusion, and I'm not really sure if anyone specifically knows what that means, right? Diversity. We have a lot of town halls and different committees all revolve around these ideas, but I'm not quite sure if we know what we're talking about, right? And so in our policies, in our budget allocations, in all of these things, it's reflective of the understanding that we currently have.
Okay.
Right? So I think that coming together within the first 100 days and extending beyond that, but being able to understand like, okay, this is a process, figuring this out, right? And then once we kind of sit down and we're like, okay, this is what inclusion is. I don't really know what this hand motion is, but this is what inclusion is, right? This is what diversity is, and then be able to craft from the newfound understanding new policies, right? And new just constitutional things and bylaws and parts of that,
That's great. Yeah. So in regards to Elon, you mentioned inclusivity. Yeah. What does that mean to you?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. That is. So my answer, that's tricky, right? Because college is inherently exclusive, right? Organizations are inherently exclusive. Like you could probably make the case that SGA is one of the most exclusive groups on campus, right? But even then, like, what does that mean? And so I think a lot of it is making inherently exclusive organizations inclusive of one another.
Okay.
Right? And I also think it's a matter of us figuring out that, like, okay, I don't have to be invited to everything. Okay. Right? And what does that mean? And being able to understand that, like, some events and some things are for certain groups of people, and that's okay. Yeah. And so for me, it really is just about embracing the fact that everybody does belong here, but Elon, right, there's another cliche, but everyone does belong here, they have a place here, and if they don't feel as if they have a place here, I think a big part of inclusion is recognizing that they are able to create their own, right?
That's great. So what do you think is the biggest problem at Elon right now that you would like to address?
I mean, I think it stems off of that sort of like right? That what are we talking about? That we have a cultural vocabulary here at Elon where we use words like inclusion and diversity, and a lot of people talk about the busy bragging culture of Elon. And I really do want us to kind of come together and figure out, like, okay, who is Elon? Like, I think that's a big deal because everyone has their own definitions of Elon, right? And I think one issue that we kind of recognize altogether as students is like the same people show up to the same things. Right? The same people are showing up to the same town halls, and then they're put on the same committees, and because they're on the same things, they are given access to everything else, so they're in everything else. And so then they just start stacking up the resume in the email chain with like 7 things that are down there, right? I think we should address that and recognize that, like, how do we make spaces and create platforms that are inclusive to everybody and to get people who aren't typically recognized by the institution maybe to be in those conversations and to be in those spaces.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've heard a little bit about your platform, your voice, your choice is what it's called?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
For sure, yeah. So this isn't redundant, but it is your voice, your choice, right? So I think there is, in our generation, a lot of the times we have sort of like, that doesn't matter mentality, like that doesn't affect me, right? Politics, like whatever, I don't need to vote, like it's fine. And there's sort of like an apathetic perspective, but it is your voice, it's your choice, right? Like, we are Elon collectively, everybody, hello. We are Elon, right? So we get to choose who Elon is and who Elon is going to be. So I think what your voice, your choice is regardless if you vote for Jack or you vote for me, like, please just go vote, like, right? Like, just go out and vote because this is your school. It's our school. And I think that's really where that stems from.
And speaking of voting, would you mind just letting people know when and how they can vote and make their voices heard?
Yeah, for sure. So it's March 13th and 14th. So this is this upcoming week. I believe it's Tuesday, Wednesday. Is that calendars? I think that's right. And it's on Phoenix Connect. Everything you can kind of figure out through there. But again, it is the 13th and the 14th, and it closes, I believe, at 5 p.m. on the 14th.
Wednesday and Thursday.
Wednesday and Thursday?
Yep.
Thank you. I don't know.
No problem. No problem.
Appreciate it.
No problem. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And Nate, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Make sure you keep watching. Nate, Baylor, Jack, and I are going to be playing a little game, so stick around.
Woo!
Thank you so much.